is we've got another round of talks this week, and then June, Boris Johnson is going to go to the high-level meeting at the end of June. The first thing is, I just want to say that as part of my job, I'm working with the European Trade Union Congress, which is the TUC equivalent for all the unions in Europe. And they have a very good relationship with Barnier and the civil servants there. So we've always had a two-prong approach to negotiations. One, influencing as much as we can here, and second one, influencing Barnier through the ETUC. And essentially the conclusion is that really Boris is putting his politics before economics, because it's quite evident the dire impact that Brexit's going to have, and whether you get a bad deal or a no deal, it's not economically going to be any near beneficial as what we've got at the moment. On saying that, it seems to be that he's more concerned about his legacy than he is really about the economic impact that Brexit's going to have on the UK. Now, at the same time though, and the reason why I'm mentioning it now, because I'm going to come back to it at the end, what we've seen with his handling of COVID is that Boris's popularity has gone down in the polls, and really that's significant because it could be something that we exploit as we go towards the crucial moments in June to October on negotiations. Whilst Boris has stuck to his guns, you know, Brexit at all costs, the trade union movement has been sticking to its own guns, if you like. We've always had three priorities, which is essentially protect jobs, make sure that our level playing field in regulation standards, whether the workers' rights, equality rights, environmental rights, are kept in a level playing field through what's called non-regression clauses or dynamic alignment. And the third thing has always been around the priority of Northern Ireland defending the Good Friday Agreement and preventing a hard border. And I'm not going to talk about the third issue today because I know a couple of weeks ago you had something on Ireland, and also the work we're doing on Ireland itself is quite big, and it's not part of the actual negotiations because it sits in the joint committee at the moment, which is all shrouded in secrecy. And we're trying to find out as much as we can about that. But that's another story, which I can ask a question or two about what I know about that at the moment, but I'm not going to concentrate on Ireland particularly here. What I first of all wanted to say is that the trade unions, TUC, did a poll recently where, and to its benefit for us, we showed that 2/3 of workers, trade union workers, say that they expect from Brexit at least the equivalent rights that we've got now or improved. They don't want a weakening or, you know, a lessening of any of our rights. And so that's really good for the trade union movement to say to Boris, well, this is what, we have got a mandate from our workers and this is what they're telling us. Now, on saying that, COVID is going to bring about mass unemployment. That's all the models of prediction. It's going to be a global recession. But not only that, here in the UK in particular, they think the people that will be hit most will be young people. So it's going to be a big generational thing for them. So one of the jobs we have to do is to say to young people who may not be familiar with the importance of trade unions, that the reason why it's more important now to have these workers' rights is so that we can protect you with social programs, with apprenticeships, with all those kind of rights and skills to get us through the recession that everyone is predicting. What we also are picking up is that Boris Johnson, and this might be cynical, some of you think, is going to use the pandemic and COVID to hide the bad consequences of Brexit. So basically what he's going to say is, oh, that's not Brexit, that's because of the pandemic. So it's going to be very intertwined now, the world we're going to see post-Brexit and post-COVID. And that's something else that we can basically begin to exploit as well. So if you think about the mood in the UK, we've been clapping for carers every Thursday, and we haven't been clapping for bankers. We haven't been clapping for hedge funds, you know, entrepreneurs or anything like that. For the first time in a long time, there's been a move towards celebrating the social and the collective. And that actually works against the government at the moment, but it actually works for the trade unions and what we're trying to say about protecting workers' rights. And it's not just the social collective that's coming back into people's minds around just the clapping for carers, for example, but also that the understanding on the reliance of low-paid workers, frontline workers, carers, health workers, shop workers, all those people who have been putting themselves at risk with poor PPE, etc. What we've also got at the moment is a government trying to negotiate for trade deals when there's a collapse in the global supply chain, whether it's for PPE or other issues, because trade will adapt around the pandemic. So it's a very strange position for the government to be in, to try and negotiate trade deals, which are not as good as what we've got now, but also where you're likely to slap tariffs when you've got mass unemployment happening and you're going to have uncertainty in the economy on those goods, making things a lot more expensive. So all this is working against the government at the moment. And we could say, actually, that COVID is an opportunity just as much for the labour movement as Brexit was for populist right-wing nationalists like Boris Johnson, Cummings, and you know, others in the Tory party. So that is what we have to focus on. What opportunities have we got, and not focus on the opportunities they think they have. In the future negotiation rounds, there are 11 topics, but trade unions like Unison, who are public service unions, we focus really on 4 things. And I say I'm keeping Ireland out of this discussion, so that's another thing which I'm not going to mention now. Largely is, how do we keep public services out of being liberalised in the trade deal? How do we make sure that the provisions we've got in public procurement, which are the rules that are set for when you want to outsource a public service, they're very good under Europe, they're the best in the world. How do we keep the public procurement provisions we've got, which benefit everybody? We also want the level playing field in all the regulations, not just work. And last but not least, which is not often discussed about, digital rights. Because right bang in the middle of all these trade deals is e-commerce. And e-commerce is going to become more and more important as we begin to look at how we adapt to climate change, and also in a world where digitalization is going to take over, and it'll take over everybody's life, you know, from the cradle to the grave. We're doing a big project with the TUC looking into all this. And at the moment, if you look at digital, there's lack of governance, there's lack of legislation, people don't understand the impact. If I said to you in horror that the public procurement regulations and the emergency legislation to COVID had been suspended, and Dominic Cummings has practically given NHS contracts on digitalisation or the tracing apps to his friends, it's quite scary that there hasn't been much resistance or resilience to this. But this is just the beginning of what you can see, how there are a group of people in this world who want to basically insert digitalisation with very little legislation or protection for our rights. And this has got to be challenged as well. And we are raising this also in the Brexit talks, along with all the other trade deals that I mentioned, that we need governance and a lot stronger. GDPR is a European creation which protects our rights, and it actually protects workers' rights. There's no other equivalent in the world. America doesn't want GDPR, China doesn't want GDPR, Australia doesn't want GDPR, Japan doesn't want GDPR. So all these new countries we're going to be moving into do not want GDPR, and that's a big threat to our rights. So we're working with a lot of people around that as well. Yes, we can say something about a no deal in a minute. What I wanted to say is that the trade union movement is saying that out of all the things, if there's going to have to be a compromise to prevent a no deal, which it's looking like we are heading to a no deal, and I'll say a bit more about that. But if we wanted to say the last minute ditch, because there's always a last minute ditch in negotiations, to Barnier, look, don't compromise on our workers' rights or level playing field. Please compromise on something else. That is what we're going to be saying, basically. That is our plan B if we have to do a compromise deal. Because without a level playing field, we know we're going to lose quite a lot. Competition, okay, is all about the race to the bottom. And once you remove rights, and I'm not going to get into the complexities of what a Mode 4 deal is, but essentially it's where you can move workers in from another country and you do not have to give them the equivalent rights of your citizens in that country. Okay, this is a big deal that they use in lots of deals around the world, but Europe has always fought against that. But we do know that the government is quite keen on this type of deal on workers' rights. Right, so have we got any leverage with COVID? What have we got to say to Boris? You know, you're going to make a big mistake here with Brexit, and you've got to think about COVID. Last week, we had a meeting with our American trade unions, the AL-FCIO, who are the equivalent to the TUC, who are working on the UK-US deal with us, so that we're all saying the same things on both sides. And American trade unions actually are part of the consultation mechanism. We don't have that in the UK. Even Parliament can't even debate the trade deals here in the UK. It's that unaccountable. But in America, trade unions sit on the negotiating table. So what they've told us is that in America, the global recession, the recession there is really terrible. They've estimated there'll be 50 million unemployed people. That is a huge thing for Trump to overcome, and we can benefit from that in the sense that we can exploit that. And the reason why I'm saying that is because Boris Johnson's going to be stuck with Trump trying to get elected, and we've got the social unrest over the racism that we've witnessed in the last week with the police. And that unrest has been fueled not only by racism, but also economic and social factors, as we know. And then you've got Boris Johnson is going to be caught by the EU. The EU have just signed off a £750 billion COVID recovery package. Has already said, if there's a no deal, I'll be protected because I'm going to use that money, and the EU have promised me that they will help us out. Boris Johnson has got no recovery package. He hasn't mentioned it. In fact, if you think, he's what you call front-loaded. He is front-loaded on the pandemic by putting all the cost up front, by furlough, wage retention, all the other things he's done to help business and small business, etc. But he hasn't got, so he's going to have a bill at the end of it, but there's no recovery package that we're hearing of. So if he hasn't got a recovery package and he's got Europe has, okay, they're going to be able to close the recovery gap much quicker than the UK can. And Trump is not going to be in a position to even offer anything, we don't think, to the UK. They might do a silly little glossy deal, which would be meaningless, saying, oh, we've got a deal, so Trump can say he's done something and Boris can say. But in all reality, I sit on some of these trade deal groups with the Department of Trade and Industry. There's no way they're going to get a proper deal through. It's just going to be window dressing. So Boris Johnson is going to be in a hard place. That's what I'm going to say to you. And all these other deals, no way are going to make up for the loss of what deal we had with Europe. Now, the Labour Party is saying, let's take a step back. let's see, you know what, let's Boris Johnson own this. It's his mess he's creating. So that's why they're sitting out on the call for an extension. The TUC and Unison aren't, we're not sitting on the fence necessarily about an extension. We do understand both sides for calling it and not calling it. Is it the right time? Is it better to let Johnson get into this mess? And what we can do is shine the spotlight on the mess he's making to put pressure to get the kind of deal in October, November that we want, that compromise that I talked about, where we get our level playing field if something else goes. So it's a kind of a bit of a waiting game at the moment. We don't really know what Boris Johnson is thinking. What we do know is, though, is that the negotiations are at a political impasse. It's not a bureaucratic impasse where you've got bureaucrats with all the detail and it's very, very technical. You've got, in the US deal alone, I've been told they've got 200 negotiators. I hate to imagine what they've got in the EU negotiations, because they've got like 5 teams and there must be hundreds of people working on this for every country. So there's a lot of technical detail. It's got to get around 27 countries. It's not going to happen. So we've been told Boris Johnson, for the first time, is actually in person going to attend the high-level talks in June. And that to us is significant, because he hasn't done that before. Frost and Gove have done it, because Gove is the chair of the Joint Committee, as well as the main lead with Frost on the future relationship. So he's going to send some message to the EU at the end of June, and we don't really know what that is. But what we do know is that consistently, whether it was during the referendum, during the Brexit negotiations with the withdrawal agreement, and after we then got the withdrawal agreement, and now on the future EU-UK, what we do know is that the government is not really got a coherent programme. And one of the problems is that the trade unions do. We are saying, post-COVID, we're not having austerity back. Get yourself a recovery programme like the EU and start investing in infrastructure, services, jobs, apprenticeships for young people. You know, we want a recovery programme, and we want that in the UK here. So the trade union movement can fight still for the social Europe that we've always believed in, and at the same time campaign for the government to accept we want a level playing field, and that is not up for compromise. The other thing is that the pandemic has shown the worth of trade unions, if you like. So there's been an increase in trade union membership, and it's not just our representation in central government. The government has agreed that trade unions can sit on these trade groups. So I sit on a group for public services and public procurement on the Japan deal, the American deal, the Australian and New Zealand deal. But the government has not allowed us to discuss Brexit or the EU-UK future relationship. And the reason why they're doing it is because they don't want really to have anything published. So it's all secrecy, Brexit, EU-UK, Irish Protocol and the Joint Committee. Whereas they've just now said to the trade unions, we'll let you see the detail of the EU-Japan deal and the UK-Japan deal and the UK-American deal, but guess what? You're going to have to sign a gagging clause, a non-disclosure agreement. So if the trade unions sit on these committees, we then won't be able to discuss it with our members. So we're seeking legal advice at the moment around what should our response be, because obviously we want to be able to comment and have an input on behalf of our members, but how can we do that if we've been told we won't get the detail and we have to do a non-disclosure agreement? No other country in the world does trade deals like this government. So that's why it's very difficult to predict what Boris will do, because what we do know is that Japan, America, New Zealand, Australia are not going to replace half of what we've got with the EU. And that's why we think they don't want people to really know the true detail of it. So I kind of will end that there, because I think I've covered quite a bit of the ground there. From the TUC point of view, we really don't know how Boris is going to play out, calling for an extension. We don't think he will. We think he's going to try and get the EU to the last ditch kind of hurdle in October and do some mini deals. So there's still a lot to play for. And what we do know is that we've got to keep the pressure up, both on Boris Johnson, Gove, Frost, and we've got to keep the pressure up on Barnier. And I think the TUC and the trade unions have played a really important role, showing Barnier how determined we are on behalf of workers in the UK to keep all those rights that we have fought for, and not allow this government to just rip them up if they want to race us down to the bottom to get a competitive edge globally in trade deals. I'll leave it there, Mike. I think I've spoken enough.
That was great. Thank you so much, Alison. I'm really grateful for that. So if you've got a question for Alison, could you raise a hand, ideally using your computer rather than putting your hand up, because I can't see everybody. That would be great. Or you can type in the chat if you've got a question as well, so I can see it there. Great. Go ahead, Rosalind. I'll need to unmute you. You're unmuted now.
What can you do to reassure me that environmental rights will be protected by trade unionists? I'm particularly concerned about air pollution, for example. What can you tell me, please?
Great. Go ahead, Alison.
Yes, so we work with the Brexit Civil Society Alliance, which has the Green Alliance on it, sustainability on it, and the Earth on it. And we're working with them on trade bills where we're looking at how basically none of the chapters on the environment, which normally goes into their sustainability chapter, lowers any of those standards or regulations. What we have argued, and this is where we know Boris Johnson's giving us a worse deal than Theresa May. Originally, Theresa May said that all rights will be subject to the European Court of Justice, but they've now removed. So if you want to arbitrate and say you've broken, you know, this environmental legislation on REACH or whatever equivalents we've got, we originally argued that the arbitrator, because they're European standards and we've got a level playing field and we've got dynamic alignment and a non-regression clause, it would be up to the European Court to say whether we've breached them or not. Boris Johnson took them out and we're trying to now put them back in the level playing field, but it's been weakened in his withdrawal agreement wording. That's what happened when he took back, when he basically rewrote some of the withdrawal agreement after Theresa May lost the election and Boris Johnson won the leadership. So we're doing quite a bit on that on trade bills, and globally we work with the ITUC and everything. We have a standard clause in all the environmental rights. Essentially, just like workers' rights, civil rights, digital rights, we say equivalence is not really good enough, because at the moment, if we Brexit with no level playing field, it means that on environmental rights, the UK can say we're equivalent to the EU, and therefore what, if anyone wants to challenge us, it's done domestically in our courts and not in the European Court of Justice. And the reason why that's really terrible is because under the European Court of Justice, anybody could have taken a case to the European Court as a citizen and say you've broken this country's breaking EU rules. We've lost all that representation. So the arbitration is really important. And one of the things we're arguing for, and they have said trade unions, for example, and civil society groups, including environmental groups, can sit on, it's a body, but basically it's got no teeth or power because we can't enforce it. And the problem is, you can have all these committees which can review all these things, but there's no enforcement, and it's the enforcement that we want more than anything. So you'll get fined, or the EU can say, well, you've broken the withdrawal agreement, so we're going to punish you this way. That's the kind of thing that we're looking for, but we haven't got that far yet. As I say, because the government literally doesn't want any level playing field apart from state aid. And the reason why we only want state aid is because it basically probably isn't that interested anyway in funding lots of state projects here in the UK. So that's why it's agreeing to it. But also because state aid is all about competition and business. It doesn't cover rights though. So they're doing that for business. They're not doing anything for workers or environment, if you like.
Thank you very much.
Right, sorry about that, I was on mute. That was really helpful, thanks very much. And we've got a question from Ruth, and similar questions below. Has the Labour Party given up on getting an extension, Alison, in your view?
I don't know, because I haven't spoken to Rachel Reeves. I know the TUC have, and the TUC has said that basically the Labour Party's position is, I guess, that Boris Johnson's going to make a mess, and let's just put the spotlight on that mess he's going to create. If we try and argue for an extension, and this is not my words, this is what I'm just being anecdotal here. If Labour tries to, you know, call for an extension, you'll give Boris Johnson kind of, you know, a chance to kind of bring back his rant about take back control and Brexit is happening. So, and then you'll be letting him off the hook for COVID, where he's really messing up. And also he's going to mess up on these trade deals, you know, unless he's going to compromise somewhere. So that is the argument or the logic. But logically, you would say you can't really expect to get a good deal at the moment if, because everyone's focusing on COVID and there's going to be a global recession. So logically, you would call for an extension, but that logic's not there with the government. So what we think they're going to do is try and hide under the blanket of the, you know, post-COVID recession and say, oh no, this isn't Brexit, this is just part of the global recession we're all in. So that's where we've got to pick him up. And I don't really know what the wider trade union, I know that they're meeting Barnier in July, as I said, and they may get a strategy from there as the way forward. They're still doing all the technical detail and acting like we're still negotiating a deal. And I think the feeling is that people have, there's a feeling I think in Europe I'm picking up, again this is anecdotal, I can't say for sure, that the EU negotiators are getting very impatient with the UK, and they really just think that the UK is going for a no deal now. That's what they kind of are thinking, so yeah.
Great, thanks, thanks Alison. And then the next question on here is from Carolyn. How to persuade all the people who voted Tory instead of Labour of the importance of the work you're doing on their behalf? I guess that's partly a question of how to make people take notice, because I think, I may be misreading.
On the work she's doing so splendidly on their behalf.
Absolutely, she is, and they are. and I don't want to misrepresent your question, Carolyn, but it would seem to me that the general public doesn't really have a sense that the negotiations are happening or that they're important to their lives. So I guess partly that's a question of how do we make these negotiations relevant to people's daily lives and make people take notice.
Yeah.
Well, understandably, people are concerned about other things at the moment.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, the problem you've had, and this is one of the challenges that the Labour Party's had too, is that they're not party to any of these trade discussions. The government doesn't share its drafts directly to Rachel, the equivalent of Michael Gove, for example, Rachel Reeves, or anybody else. So one of the things we've worked with Keir Starmer on in the trade bill is the fact that the Labour Party voted straight against the trade bill on the basis that there's no accountability. Parliament is not being given any powers to discuss trade bills. And, you know, I thought the Labour Party were really right there. They did the right thing there by basically saying that how can we vote for a bill that literally disempowers sovereign Parliament? All the government wants to do is whack down a deal at the end, or any trade deal, and say to Parliament, here you go, take it or leave it. And they, you know, it's called a negative procedure. We can't make amendments. It doesn't go through the whole procedure of both houses where you can do report stage, etc. So it's a done deal. So it's very difficult for Labour. But on saying that, there are some Brexit bills going through. We've got the agricultural bill, we've got the European Social Security EU withdrawal bill, and the trade bill are the three main ones. But what we're saying, and the campaign that the unions have been doing, is saying, you know, trade unions are very important, and COVID shows you the importance of all this, because Francis O'Grady literally did get the front door open to say, you're going to have to furlough workers, you're going to have to keep them on, you're going to, you know. And I think that's resonated with the public, that for the first time you can actually hear on news ministers saying we'll be talking to the trade unions, you know. And I think to get those people involved and engaged about the importance of what we're doing in Brexit is to say, look, these rights that you've got in the workplace, we are better off protecting you with these rights from Europe, which is what rather than relying on the UK, because one of the problems you've got though is it's all very technical details. So
I know.
it's simple. You've got to make them feel these rights in the workplace. You've got to make them realise, wow, you've got these, because that's the importance of collective and solidarity.
Yeah.
And it's coming back in vogue. And we've got to engage young people in apprenticeships and try and do a lot to support them, who, as we know, will be sadly, likely the hardest hit.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Alison. So next up is Chris, I guess related to that, saying, why isn't Labour fighting for transparency in the trade deals?
Well, Labour is. Yeah,
Labour
sorry,
is.
Labour is. We've had, so basically we've had these bills twice, because in the general election, these bills had to drop because the Queen's speech ended. That's just the way Parliament is. And they were rewritten. But in the last trade bill, 2017 to 19, it was stuck in the Lords because the Lords wouldn't budge. The Lords passed the amendment to say that trade bills have to go through Parliament as primary legislation. And the government just left them there because at that stage the withdrawal agreement couldn't get through, so there was no point doing the trade bill. And then the trade bill's now come back. It's the same as it was, except the government now has pushed ahead. And in that trade bill, what they're saying is that they're planning in the trade bill through the back door for a no-deal Brexit, where everything defaults to the WTO, which we know is a lot weaker in a lot of our provisions than we have in Europe. So basically, we have got amendments. Caroline Lucas has supported us, the SNP, along with Labour, basically all the opposition parties. We've now got the SDLP, of course, who will no doubt support that, and Plaid Cymru. there is, apart from the government and the Lords, a big feeling that trade bills should go through Parliament. But at the moment, you've got a government who are not going to listen to that, and they've got the majority. So there's nothing we can do. Only a Labour government, really, or a coalition majority government, if you like, would be able to pass that through. And that's just the sad use of the way that our Parliament runs, you know. And even on the European Social Security Bill, I'm not sure about the trade bill, we were shocked that the European Social Security Immigration Bill is not even going to be debated through the whole House at committee stage. It's just going to a public bill committee, which means that a lot of MPs just won't even hear half the discussions and debates. And the same could happen to the trade bill too. So it really is a question for Parliament, really, as Hansard would support, to introduce a lot more transparency, stop the use of statutory instruments, stop the use of CRAG, especially as we now have taken back control, if you like.
So, sorry, thanks for that. Can I come in here? Is that all right?
Yes, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, no, thanks for that answer. But yeah, I can see with the minority there's a problem clearly. But can't Labour make a bigger fuss about it? I mean, I hear nothing of this in the newspapers or anything, and it seems to me that all this stuff going in under the carpet. I mean, and can't you do more in the Lords to try and do something? I don't know. I'm just trying to. I'm surprised that Labour. I'm just hearing nothing from Keir at the moment. It would seem that there's an opportunity for making a bit of a fuss. That's all. Or maybe he's. I mean, he knows the tactics better, so maybe he's biding his time. But to go through without any fuss at all sounds a bit, well, not too good. Let me put it that way.
No, Labour is tabling amendments. Don't get me wrong, and the amendments in the trade bill will call for trade bills to go through Parliament as opposed to CRAG. Someone just asked what CRAG is. I can't remember what it stands for, committee something, but CRAG just means that you just have to lay the bill down. It doesn't go through normal procedure. And I don't know why it was ever introduced for trade bills, but it's basically, I'm not sure. But I think it just means something about the royal assent. It's just automatically given. You just lay it down. You don't have to have the procedure.
I know. Yeah, I can understand that. I do understand that. I understand it's a difficult thing to do, particularly with a minority. The thing that's getting me is why there's no fuss. Maybe the press isn't making any fuss. I just, you know, it seems to me that there's. Yeah, I like the idea amendments are going in, but I'm just not hearing anything about this. And maybe it's the media. Maybe you need to wind the media up a bit more.
I'll just jump in on that. I mean, I think obviously people are obsessed, and rightly so, with coronavirus at the moment.
Yeah, sure.
But I think one of the other things is that it's just difficult to get people interested in trade deals. To most people in the country, trade deals doesn't sound like an interesting subject of conversation, particularly when people are thinking about protecting their health and, you know, possibly dying from a virus, and they're also otherwise thinking about their futures and their jobs and their businesses, whether to send their kids to school, and, you know, all of those things. I think it's a Herculean task to get people in that context interested in trade deals, and I think that Alison's completely right that it needs to be focused. The way to do that is to focus it on something that is of tangible benefit to people, and the most obvious thing that it would be workers' rights. But even workers' rights is probably too broad, and it needs to come down to, well, you might not get maternity leave anymore, or you might have to work, you know, 80 hours a week rather than.
What about hormone beef?
Sorry?
What about hormone beef?
Well, I mean, hormone beef and
people's fingers coming off in US fish companies and things like that.
Hormone beef and chlorinated chicken are two of the things that they have cut through, and again, because they're specific, I think. Yeah. We'll move on to the next question.
Okay.
From Carolyn. So you said, is there anything that, just because of time, Chris, is there anything trade unions can do to break the hold of ISDSs? What's an ISDS?
This is the International Court where corporations can take countries to court and win cases against them if countries don't do what the corporations want to do. And how we allowed this to happen, obviously our eyes were closed, our heads were in the sand, why this was allowed to happen. I mean, I don't know that the trade unions can do anything, but I would be interested to hear what Alison thinks about that.
Yes, so we don't support, obviously, these international courts because they're not accountable, they're not elected, and they take away sovereign parliament, in our view. And so under CETA, the government, to get CETA through, which is the Canadian-European deal, the EU replaced ISDS with a different name for it was almost similar, but except it would be more democratic, being appointed through the commission, elected commissioners, I think they said.
Marginally.
So it would have you know, less rights over the ECJ. What you've got at the moment is arbitration is really important in trade deals. So when ISDS comes into play for some things, but not other things. So you've got also the WTO have got a court, which of course Donald Trump has been blocking. So now the EU and a few other countries have set up a different court, an appellate it's called. But you'll always have to have an arbitrator. There's nothing wrong having an arbitrator if you've got obviously you know, a case where you believe someone has breached the contract or the obligations in that trade deal. But it's how is it democratic? Who's allowed to appeal in it? So the thing about the interstate court was that citizens don't have rights there, trade unions don't have rights there, only governments and companies. So a company can take a government to court. So it's just all about corporate protection of their financial investments, which is why we don't support them, because there's no obligation for any other rights being protected. So we would like to see the eradication of all these courts, and we campaign for that all the time. We campaign for that in the WTO, we campaign for that in the EU, and we'll do exactly the same here with the UK. You know, on the basis that these courts are not elected, they're not accountable, and you know, they are a bit of potentially now, people are realising more and more about the significance of these courts and the powers they have. So hopefully we can mobilise people against that. But as I say, it is these courts is what prevented TTIP, amongst other things, of course, because some of the 27 countries weren't, like Belgium, weren't happy with these courts, and they voted against it. So TTIP basically couldn't be ratified. And that was the other thing I've just missed out in the conversation is, at this stage, it's not even been clear, and no one's discussed with us, whether this is a mixed competency agreement or straightforward EU agreement. And the significance of that is important because if you include certain things in a trade deal, it has to be like, and it's like finance and investment, then it has to be a mixed competency, which means that it has to get ratified by all 27 countries. My understanding at the moment is that they've kept finance out of the EU future negotiation precisely because they rush it through. So in that case, you wouldn't have ISDS attached to this. I think there's going to be a separate deal on that. And again, that deal will be in secret. We won't get to see it. Parliamentaries won't be able to get to see it. And this is the problem you've got. We could actually have a whole series of little deals on equivalence, financial passporting, recognition of qualifications, digitalisation. The UK wants its own public procurement legislation, it said, and America has this shielding thing in digitalisation. So you might have a series of separate agreements rather than the overarching agreement, which is what the EU wanted. So, and I think the reason why the UK wants that is so that it does not have to go to the 27 countries, because it wouldn't be seen as what's called a mixed competence.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. Right, what's next? Patrick. So yeah, how can we best encourage young people into the trade union movement?
Oh, well, we do have, most unions will have young members. We have a young members national officer, and the TUC has also a young members, along with all our other equality or member participation groups. So the things at TUC, it was Young Worker of the Year, I think, last year, and they did a lot of work around apprenticeship, what it's like to be a young worker, the importance of unions. It's very hard, believe it or not, to recruit young workers in the workplace, particularly, and we're public services, so I can't speak for all unions. But it is noticeably a lot harder to recruit younger people. And I think it's generally when people are a bit older that they join unions, maybe because they're in precarious workplaces. So it's about explaining our fight for to end zero contract hours, how to get better, obviously, terms and conditions for young people, trying to level up the minimum wage equally between adults. It's basically winning all those arguments over, really. And I think there'll have to be a lot more initiatives for young people once post-COVID is over, because you know, university students, they just think there's not going to be jobs for them. It's going to be quite a bleak picture, I think, next year. Obviously, we work with employers. You know, we do lots of employers joint working to attract young people. We've got some very good employers who do social partnership with, especially in the NHS and local governments, and even some of the big private contracting firms do work to try and encourage young people to join unions as well. I don't know if Annie wants to say anything, because Annie knows probably a bit more about what Unison does, because Annie's a lay member for Unison.
Hi. I think you covered it all quite clearly, Alison, actually. Personally, I think the way in which we can get young members to actually join the union is to ask them. Yeah, is to actually ask them, especially at the beginning, because unless they've come from a family who have got trade unionists in them or are active, they actually have no idea. There's not learnt at school what a trade union is, what the benefits are. So the first time they ever come across trade union is when at the workplace. And if we have an active trade union in a workplace, they will be asked, but otherwise they won't be, and they won't. So it's actually just to make sure we're active in all the workplaces. And now with apprenticeships and everything, that's a really good way. They get a huge discount in membership, and they can actually become active. And as Alison said, you know, most unions will relish the thought of having active young members, because you know, we're an old workforce now, especially in public sector. I think our average age is over 50, and we need to get more people getting more involved, and young people. So ask and find out what they want, you know, whether it is, especially now, it is going to be the terms and conditions, the apprenticeships, getting people back into, making them feel safe, yeah, back in the working environment. I hope that's
Great, thanks, Anu. So there's a comment here from Fiona about businesses speaking out. So I guess slightly broader than that, but Alison, what discussions have you had with businesses or with business groups or umbrella organisations about them campaigning for a Brexit transition period, if any?
Yes, that came up with a discussion with Francis Brady the other day that I was in a meeting with. Basically, it seems like business have given up. You know, they haven't been listened to by the government. We did do quite a lot of work jointly with the CBI and other businesses. Our understanding is that the City of London and finances have gone their own way. They've already kind of worked out what they're going to do, and they've just accepted Brexit, and they're going to carry on. So public services, obviously, we have worked with the NHS. I'm sure NHS agrees with us on an extension. what I did hear a couple of weeks ago is that they'd moved quite a lot of civil servants off COVID back onto a Brexit no deal. So I don't think the NHS would have been happy about that, because the resources to go into preparing for a no deal take away resources, obviously, for dealing with COVID. So I'm sure secretly the NHS that we work with, the employer's side, will be agreeing that an extension is probably the best option. Local government have called for an extension. Northern Ireland's called for an extension. Scotland's called for an extension. Wales has called for an extension. And I'm sure a lot of employers have said to the government, we're not ready for a no deal. And in Northern Ireland particularly, there's real concern, and in Ireland too, because a no deal is more precarious, obviously, in the island of Ireland, because how they're going to trade, the electricity is all shared as well, but one will have an energy agreement with the EU and one won't. So how the hell is that going to work out? This was coming from the General Secretary of the ITUC the other week. So there are huge, big issues, and I'm not party to all of them, and I guess basically the government must be speaking to sectors, but they're not talking to the public sector. Don't forget, they're trying to pretend at the moment that the NHS, for example, is not going to be in any trade deal. So, but they will be talking to other sectors, I imagine, manufacturing. We know in the agricultural bill that 27 Tories did rebel against Boris Johnson because they don't want tariffs put on their food exports, because they're frightened they won't be able to export it, and they're going to go out of business. So the government is talking to these sectors, but I don't really know, apart from what I saw in the trade bill. I think Tory MPs are also talking to them as well in their constituencies. And just to finally add, one of the things that is clear is that there was a report out, and I've forgotten what it is because two people have mentioned it to me today, but what it shows basically is that the impact on Brexit is going to be worse in all those Labour traditional strongholds that voted Tory, is it called the Red Wall areas? They're going to actually be impacted the worst economically on Brexit, this report has said. So you're going to have a lot of Tory MPs, best for Britain, thank you, yeah. They're going to have a lot of Tory MPs who are really going to be, you know, wanting Johnson to deliver, or else, you know, that they're going to fail on those seats, that's for sure.
Great. Right, it's 1 minute to 7, so we'll wrap up in a sec. Unless anyone has a final comment that they want to give, or a final question they want to ask. No? Okay, great. Well, in that case, Alison, thank you so much. That was amazing. Really good to see you. And I know we're all really grateful for your time. So thank you again for that. And great to see everybody. And we will be back in a couple of weeks with somebody else. And in the meantime, keep in touch. And if you've got any good ideas, let us know. Oh, someone just asked, what can we be doing as Labour for European Future? So obviously we're talking to Labour ministers and Rachel Reeves's team and so on about what they're doing, and then we're also trying to reach out to business groups and medics and the NHS and whatever, because we need to get as many voices out talking about this as possible. I saw Sadiq Khan said today that he wanted the government to go for an extension. That's nothing to do with us. He did that off his own bat, which is great. But if we get more and more people like that speaking out, at least we'll be making the point, even if we don't get there. But of course, ideally we would get there. But of course, the more people speak out, the more difficult it is for the government just to push on regardless. So on that note, if anyone's got any links to the NHS or to a business or to a business group, it will be great to put in touch, and feel free to get in touch with me directly about that. Great. Okay, well, thanks again, Alison. And
yes, good. Thank you, everybody.
See you all soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.